last 2 weeks, I have been commenting on the situation of the Church following the Vatican's decision to judge Monsignor Vigano and his very harsh response. In recent days, I have said, in my opinion, I believe that the majority of those who sympathize, they follow Monsignor Vigano, do not do so because they have sufficient theological training that leads them to deny the validity of the Second Vatican Council, but as a rejection to the abuses that have been committed in all orders, not only in the liturgical, to the abuses committed during the last 60 years when applying the Council. This rejection of abuse leads them to reject the Second Vatican Council, which they consider not an inevitable cause, but as a necessary cause of the abuses, and also leads them to reject Pope Francis, because they consider him responsible for the abuses being tolerated, or even encouraged. He has insisted, I insist, once again, that the Second Vatican Council can be applied in continuity with tradition, and with the Word of God. This was what St. John Paul II and Benedict XVI defended. Rejecting the Council means, among other things, rejecting St. John Paul II and rejecting Benedict XVI. I think it should also be clear to those who follow Monsignor Vigano. I, of course, am not willing to go into it. I believe that the possibility of applying the Council in continuity and not in rupture, that is what these two great popes tried and what we must continue trying. Of course, this is not the thesis of the liberals. They are in favor of the rupture. The Church, according to them, would begin from the Second Vatican Council, which furthermore, also according to them, is a council that cannot be read and interpreted based on what is written and approved, but rather based on an evanescent spirit of the council, that no one knows what it is, because it is not written. And that is what caused all kind of abuses. Regarding the rejection of Pope Francis for his supposed support for all liberal positions, I believe that we must distinguish between the papacy and the Pope, because by rejecting the Pope there is a risk of rejecting the papacy. That is, of falling into what it seems to me that Monsignor Vigano has fallen, when he says that we have been without a legitimate Pope since Pius XII, and we are in a situation instead of vacantist. There has not been a Pope since Pius XII, nor St. John XXIII, nor those who succeeded them to the present are legitimate popes. That, in reality and in practice, carries with it a very hard blow to the papacy, and the papacy is an institution willed, voluntarily, explicitly by Jesus Christ. All this reminds me of what Jacques and Raisa Maritain write in his book about old and dear friendships. They say when they were outside the church, they began to feel attracted to Jesus Christ. They had some friends who had found the path to Christ and talked them about Christ, and it attracted them more and more. But that they experienced, later of course they changed their mind. But at first they experienced the church as a huge quagmire, as a place where mud was abundant, with animal excrement, quagmire. They didn't want to enter it, and that a friend, possibly Leon Bloy, told them, "Be careful that when you wash the child in a basin, you do not pour the dirty water along with the child, because when the water is dirty, you have to pour out the dirty water, but be careful not to also throw the child whom you've washed." They understood that. If they have found a treasure, it was a quagmire. It was worth going into the quagmire in order to discover that hold of a treasure. Afterwards, they asked for forgiveness because once they were inside the church, they realized that this was not the quagmire that it seemed to them when they were outside. We must be careful when we wash the child, not to throw the child with the dirty water as well. What do I mean by this? That we live in a very difficult time where there are many people, I don't know numerically how many, but there are many, who feel sympathy and are willing to follow Monsignor Vigano into a schism, and who want to be good Catholics, who may not have all much training them, but in reality what they are rejecting is the abuses that have existed long before Pope Francis, and that according to them, Pope Francis tolerates and even protects. Now, what cannot be is that they receive arguments in favor of the thesis. I say this because this week there have been two pieces of news which I believe are significant in this context. meeting as planned between the delegates of the German Episcopal Conferences and the Vatican, where an agreement in principle on the famous Synodal Council has been concluded, as has been published in principle. What seemed to be published is that the Germans who are very happy, which has aroused not suspicion but fear and terror in the other sector, who also seem to have accepted that the Synodal Council be called something else. Well, and that does not have the category of Episcopal Conferences or is above it, but I insist, has awakened fear in the other sector. What have they been granted? On the other hand, the rumor continues intensely that they are going to end the traditional Mass, not only because of the restrictions they have placed on it, but that they are going to completely end the possibility of celebrating the traditional Mass, except by those institutions, those congregations that have their charism precisely there. They, and only they, would be allowed to celebrate the traditional Mass. A large group of intellectuals, figures from a public life, a famous writer, for example, an opera singer, a well-known human rights activist, have written a letter to the Vatican asking that this please not to be done. The rumor is so serious that this group of important people have asked the Pope not to end the traditional Mass. On one hand, there are those who want to leave saying that the Second Vatican Council and the Pope are responsible for the abuses committed by the other sector. On the other hand, if these abuses occur, are tolerated, or even if these abuses increase, they will be given reasons to leave. You have to think things through very well. In a family, the father and mother strive to keep the siblings united and to avoid all kinds of favoritism between them, because that divides the family. The mission of the Pope is on one hand to maintain the unity of the Church, and on the other hand to transmit the full deposit of faith based on the Word of God and tradition. The Pope's mission, therefore, is to promote unity and ensure this deposit of faith is not diminished. If there are some favored and others are attacked, if the Germans are followed to do what they want, I'm not saying that they will be allowed. I'm saying that they were allowed on the other hand, the traditional Mass was put at an end. Those who follow Vigano would have more reasons and more arguments to say, this is not the Church of Jesus Christ. Unity is fundamental in the Church. Unity is not achieved through a transaction, cutting one fragment, adding another. That cannot be true unity. Unity is achieved based on the truth, which is Jesus Christ, who is a person. The truth is not an idea. It is not an ideology. It is a human, a divine person. Jesus Christ who said, I am the way, the truth, and the life. Therefore, the truth cannot be compromised. You cannot give in to seek a false unity, because if you did, those on the other side would leave. Of course, perhaps that is what some people want, that those on the other side leave, that is, the conservatives leave. In any case, I believe that a schism is a horrible disaster that every effort must be made to keep the Church united. I believe, I repeat, that the Second Vatican Council is valid. I believe it is, applied according to the letter of the Council and not to the spirit of the Council, which no one knows what it is, and I believe that it has to be applied in continuity with the Word of God and tradition, as defended by St. John Paul II and Benedict XVI. I believe that Pope Francis is the legitimate Pope and that he is the Vicar of Christ. Therefore, I believe that we must pray for him so that he fulfills his mission well, a very important mission of promoting unity and transmitting the message of faith in its entirety. Until next week, God willing.